I had been delivering mail to the same houses for 12 years. I know when someone's routine changes. What I didn't know was that dead men don't need their heart medication refilled. My name's Blake Hoffman, and I've been the primary mail carrier for Arivaca, Arizona since 2012. If you've never heard of Arivaca, that's because there's only about 800 people here on a good day, scattered across miles of desert scrub between Tucson and the Mexican border. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where a stranger stands out like a coyote in a henhouse, and where your mail carrier knows more about your life than your own family sometimes. I know Mrs. Patterson gets her diabetes medication delivered every third Thursday. I know the Kowalski family orders from that organic food co-op in Tempe twice a month. I know old Dale Herschel still gets letters from his daughter in Ohio even though they haven't spoken in person since 2008. And I knew that William Sullivan, retired math teacher, got his heart medication refilled like clockwork every 28 days, along with a steady stream of crossword puzzle books and magazine subscriptions. New, past tense. It was late September when I first noticed something off. The heat was finally breaking, mornings dropping down into the low 70s instead of the 90s, and I was actually enjoying my route again instead of counting the minutes until I could get back to the air-conditioned post office. I pulled up to Mr. Sullivan's place around 9:30 a.m. like I always did. Single-story adobe house, rust-red tile roof, that massive Palo Verde tree shading his front porch. His mailbox was full. Now, that might not sound like much, but in 12 years, I'd never seen William Sullivan let his mail sit for more than a few hours. The man was retired, home all day, and he'd usually be out on his porch with his coffee when I arrived, ready to chat about the weather or complain about the county road maintenance. But his box had at least 3 days of mail crammed in there, including what looked like his medication delivery from the pharmacy. I hesitated, my hand on the cluster of new envelopes I was about to add to the pile. The house looked normal. Truck in the driveway, porch light off because it was daytime, no broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But something about the stillness bothered me. I decided to check on him. I walked up the gravel path to his front door, my boots crunching loud in the quiet. The desert morning was still, no wind, just the distant sound of a raven calling from somewhere in the hills. I knocked 3 times. "Mr. Sullivan? It's Blake from the post office. Your mail's piling up. Just want to make sure everything's okay." Nothing. I waited about 30 seconds, then knocked again. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint, but unmistakable if you've ever encountered it. Something organic, decomposing in heat. Could have been a dead javelina under the porch, could have been trash that sat too long, but my gut told me it was something worse. I tried the door handle. Locked. I walked around to the side gate, found it latched but not locked, and let myself into the backyard. The smell was stronger back here, coming from the area near the back door. I called out again as I approached. "Mr. Sullivan? Blake from USPS, I'm coming around back." The back door was open. Not wide open, just cracked, maybe 3 inches. And through that gap, the smell hit me like a physical wall. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth and pushed the door open wider. The kitchen was dim, curtains drawn, normal enough. But there were flies, a lot of flies. They scattered as I stepped inside, and I saw them clustered around something on the floor near the hallway entrance. William Sullivan had been dead for at least a week. He was on his back, one arm stretched toward the phone on the kitchen wall like he'd been trying to reach it. His skin had that waxy gray color, and I'm not going to describe it beyond that because some things you can't unsee. I backed out immediately, pulled out my cell phone, and called 911. The Pima County Sheriff's deputy arrived about 45 minutes later. A guy named Roy Chen. Wait, no, Roy Brennan. I waited out front, sitting on my mail truck's bumper. trying not to think about the fact that I'd been delivering mail to a dead man's house for probably a week. Deputy Brennan took my statement, called it in, and within 2 hours, the medical examiner confirmed what was obvious. Natural causes, probable heart attack, estimated time of death between 7 and 10 days ago. Mr. Sullivan's nephew, his only living relative, was contacted. The investigation, such as it was, concluded that same afternoon. I thought that was the end of it. 3 days later, I was back on my route. The Sullivan house was empty now, cleaned out by a specialty service the nephew had hired. The truck was gone from the driveway. There was a small estate sale sign posted by the mailbox. I had been told to hold all mail until forwarding instructions came through, so when I pulled up that Thursday morning and saw mail in the box that I definitely hadn't put there, I stopped my truck and stared. 4 envelopes, 3 pieces of junk mail, and what looked like a handwritten letter. All of them addressed to William Sullivan at that address. All of them postmarked from the Arivaca post office from 2 days ago. That was impossible. I was the only carrier on this route. I hadn't delivered anything here since finding the body. I pulled out my phone and called Postmaster Linda Reeves. Linda, it's Blake. Quick question. Did anyone cover my route on Tuesday? Tuesday? No. You worked Tuesday. Why? There's mail in the Sullivan box I didn't deliver. Pause. Maybe the nephew put something there. It's postmarked from us, from 2 days ago. Longer pause. I'll check the logs. Can you bring it in? I collected the mail and continued my route, but I couldn't shake the weirdness of it. When I got back to the post office around 3 p.m., Linda was waiting with a printout of our processing records. Nothing, she said. No outgoing mail to that address in our system for 2 weeks. You sure it's our postmark? I showed her. Clear as day. Arivaca, AZ, dated 2 days prior. Huh, she said. She had this look on her face I couldn't quite read. Not confused, more like resigned. I'll file a report with the district office. Probably just a sorting error from Tucson, but I could tell she didn't believe that any more than I did. The next week, it happened again, and this time, there was more. I pulled up to the Sullivan house on my usual Thursday route, and not only was there mail in the box, there was a light on inside. The living room lamp, visible through the front window, the one that Mr. Sullivan used to keep on a timer. I sat in my truck for a full minute, hands on the wheel, staring at that light. The house was supposed to be empty. The estate sale had happened over the weekend. The nephew lived in Phoenix and had made it clear he had no interest in keeping the property. I pulled out my phone to call Deputy Brennan, but before I could dial, I saw movement through the window. Just a shadow, passing from one room to another. A person-shaped shadow. My brain tried to rationalize it. Someone from the county doing an inspection, a realtor showing the property, the nephew coming back for something he forgot. But none of those people would be there at 9:30 on a Thursday morning without a vehicle in the driveway. I put my phone away and approached the house. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The mailbox had the same type of mail as before. Junk mail, a handwritten envelope, a magazine subscription, all addressed to William Sullivan, all postmarked from our office. I knocked on the door. Hello? Mail carrier. Anyone home? The shadow stopped moving inside. Complete stillness. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming toward the door. The door opened about 6 inches, and William Sullivan looked out at me, except it wasn't William Sullivan. Couldn't be. I'd seen his body. I'd given a statement to the county. I'd watched the medical examiner's van drive away with him inside, but the man in front of me looked exactly like him. Same build, same silver hair, same reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck, even wearing the same style of button-up shirt Mr. Sullivan always wore. Light blue, short sleeves, collar slightly wrinkled. "Can I help you?" the man said. His voice was Mr. Sullivan's voice, but the cadence was off, like someone doing an impression, hitting most of the notes but missing the rhythm. I have your mail, I said. My hands were shaking. I held out the stack of envelopes. He reached through the gap in the door and took them. His hand was wrong, the fingers too long, the joints bending at slightly incorrect angles. He noticed me staring and pulled his hand back quickly. Thank you, he said. Have a good day. He started to close the door. Wait, I said. Mr. Sullivan. The door stopped, one eye visible in the gap, watching me. You're William Sullivan? I asked. Yes. No hesitation. Flat. Certain. You died, I said. I found you 3 weeks ago. The eye didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. You're mistaken, the voice said. I've been here the whole time. I called 911. The deputy came. The medical examiner. Mistaken, the voice repeated, then added softer. Please leave. Door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, my brain refusing to process what just happened. Then I turned and walked very deliberately back to my truck, got in, locked the doors, and drove directly to the post office. Linda took one look at my face and ushered me into her office. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Blake, she finally said, how long have you been on this route? 12 years. You know that. And in 12 years, have you ever noticed anything unusual about Arivaca? Thought about it. I mean, it's a small town. People are private, but unusual? Not really. She pulled out a file from her desk drawer. Old, worn at the edges. Inside were incident reports, all filed by previous mail carriers, all describing similar events. People who died but kept receiving mail. Houses that should be empty but showed signs of occupation. Voices that sounded almost right but not quite. The reports went back to 1996. There's something you need to understand about the desert, Linda said, especially this close to the border, this far from anywhere else. Things happen here that don't happen other places. Some towns have rules, unspoken ones, and Arivaca's rule is this: don't ask questions about people who come back. Come back from what? I asked. From what I did. I just didn't want to say it. What do? I asked. Deliver the mail. Don't engage. If something asks you a question, answer briefly and move on. If something invites you inside, decline. And if you see someone you know is dead, she paused. You didn't see them, understand? I didn't, but I nodded anyway. For the next 2 weeks, I followed Linda's instructions. I delivered mail to the Sullivan house every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. Sometimes the light was on. Sometimes I saw movement inside. Once I saw Mr. Sullivan in the backyard, standing completely still, facing the desert hills for the entire 5 minutes I was there. I never made eye contact, never engaged beyond a quick wave, kept my visits under 60 seconds. But other things started happening. Mrs. Patterson, the diabetic on Mesquite Street, died in her sleep on a Monday. I knew because her daughter called the post office to have her mail forwarded. But on Wednesday, I saw Mrs. Patterson working in her garden. She waved at me. I waved back and kept driving. Dale Herschel, who I'd been delivering letters from his daughter to for years, was apparently hit by a car in Tucson in early October. The obituary ran in the weekly paper. But 2 weeks later, I delivered his mail to a mailbox where his truck was parked in the driveway, and I could see him through the window, sitting in his recliner, watching TV. I started noticing patterns. The people who came back were always alone when I saw them. They never left their properties. They always did the same things in the same places, like they were running a program, following a script. And their mail was always the same: junk mail, handwritten envelopes with no return address, magazine subscriptions, never bills, never anything that required a response or action. It was like something was practicing, learning how to be them, using the mail as a prop to maintain the illusion. I mentioned this to Linda during a particularly rough week in November. She just looked at me and said, "Don't think about it too hard, Blake. Just do your job." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The breaking point came on a cold morning in early December. I was running ahead of schedule, pulled up to the Sullivan house around 8:45 a.m. instead of my usual 9:30. The sun was just clearing the eastern hills, long shadows still stretching across the desert floor. I parked and grabbed Mr. Sullivan's mail. Same as always, 3 pieces of junk and a handwritten envelope. I walked up to the mailbox and had just opened it when I heard the front door creak. I looked up. William Sullivan was standing on the porch. But this time, something was different. He wasn't wearing clothes. His skin was wrong. Gray-brown, mottled, like weathered leather stretched over a frame that didn't quite fit, and his proportions were off. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head tilted at an angle no human neck could sustain. It stared at me with eyes that didn't blink, and when it spoke, the voice came out in layers, like multiple recordings played simultaneously, some faster, some slower, all slightly out of sync. Blake Hoffman, male, carrier. It took a step forward, then another, moving in a way that was almost a walk, but not quite, like it was remembering the motion from observation but had never actually done it. I dropped the mail, back toward my truck. "You see me," it said. Not a question, a statement, an accusation. Another step. Its foot scraped against the porch boards, and I saw it then. The foot wasn't a foot. It was something pretending to be a foot, with too many joints, articulated wrong, covered in the same gray-brown skin. "I'm sorry," I said, not sure why I was apologizing. Pure instinct. I didn't mean to. "You shouldn't be here this early." Each word came with effort, like it was pulling the sounds from somewhere deep and unfamiliar. I reached my truck, fumbled with the door handle. Different time, different light. It was at the bottom of the porch steps now. "You saw." The door opened. I practically fell into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over, and I threw it into reverse. Through the windshield, I watched the William Sullivan thing drop to all fours and start moving toward me. Fast. Faster than anything that size should move. It scuttled across the gravel with limbs that bent in too many places, gray-brown skin rippling the face. Oh God. The face was still Mr. Sullivan's face, still wearing his glasses, but stretched over a skull that was the wrong shape, wrong size, elongating as it ran. I slammed the gas and rocketed backward down the driveway, nearly sideswiping a creosote bush. The thing stopped at the property line, reared up onto its hind legs, and watched me go with those unblinking eyes. I didn't slow down until I was back at the post office. Linda found me sitting in the parking lot 20 minutes later, still gripping the steering wheel. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Come inside." In her office, she made me coffee. I didn't drink. and waited until I could form words again. "I saw it," I said. "The real thing. Not the costume or whatever the hell it wears." Linda nodded slowly. "You weren't supposed to. They're usually careful about the timing." "What are they? Does it matter what we call them?" she said. "Skinwalkers, mimics, body thieves. People have different names. What matters is what they do. They find someone isolated, someone who lives alone, doesn't get many visitors. They study them, learn them, and then they replace them. Why? I don't know. Practice maybe, or maybe they just like having a place to be, a shape to wear. The desert is big and empty, Blake. Maybe they get lonely too." "That's insane." "Is it?" She pulled out another file. This one had photographs. People I recognize from my route. These are all the ones we know about in Arivaca. 11 of them. They've been here for years, some of them. They get their mail. They exist on paper. They maintain the fiction. And as long as we play along, as long as we don't look too close or show up at the wrong time, they leave the living alone. I stared at the photographs. Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Patterson, Dale Herschel, others I didn't know as well but had delivered to for years. "What happens if we don't play along?" I asked. Linda's expression went very still. "There used to be a carrier before you named Tommy Vickers. Good guy, 20 years on the route. He started asking questions. Started showing up at odd hours, trying to catch him. Started telling people in town about what he'd seen." She pulled out one more photograph. A mailbox out in the desert, miles from anywhere. The kind ranchers use for rural routes. We found Tommy's truck about 6 miles outside town, empty. His mailbag was on the seat. His keys were in the ignition, and on the ground next to the driver's door, there were tracks. Human tracks that became something else. We followed them for half a mile before they just stopped, like whatever was making them just lifted off the ground. That was in 2007. We don't talk about Tommy anymore, and we don't ask questions. I sat there, processing this. 12 years I'd been doing this route. 12 years I'd been delivering mail to things, pretending to be people, and I'd never known. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Same thing you've been doing. Deliver the mail. Don't show up early. Don't look too close. And if one of them talks to you," she paused, "just be polite. They're not malicious, Blake. They're just occupying space. As long as we respect that, we coexist." I wanted to quit. Right then. Walk out and never come back. But Linda must have seen it on my face, because she said, "If you quit, we have to bring in someone new. Someone who doesn't know the rules. Someone who might make Tommy's mistakes. Is that what you want?" It wasn't. So I stayed. That was 2 years ago. I still deliver mail to the Sullivan house every Tuesday and Thursday. I still see Mrs. Patterson in her garden. I still drop off letters for Dale Herschel. I follow the rules now. I show up at the right times. I don't make eye contact longer than I have to. I don't ask questions. And when I see someone I know is dead walking around their property, I just don't see them. There are 14 of them now. 2 more joined last year. I don't know their stories. I don't want to know. I just know that on certain mornings, their lights are on. Their trucks are in their driveways. Their mail gets collected. And in the desert, in the spaces between things, something is learning how to be human. One piece of mail at a time. If you ever take a job in a small desert town, pay attention to the patterns. Notice who lives alone. Notice who never has visitors. Notice when the mail carrier seems nervous around certain houses. And if someone tells you not to show up at a specific house before a specific time, listen to them. Some routines aren't just habits, they're boundaries. And boundaries exist for a reason. I still love this job. I still know everyone on my route. But now I understand that everyone is a complicated word. And sometimes the best way to keep people safe is to pretend you don't see the things that aren't people at all. If you've made it this far, I hope you never have to learn these rules the hard way. If you've got a story like mine, or you've seen something on your own routes that doesn't add up, I'd like to hear about it. Drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in seeing this stuff, it helps. Stay safe out there. When Tommy's voice called from the saw line at 2 a.m., I almost didn't notice his lunchbox was still sitting unopened by the time clock. Almost. My name's Ryan Kellerman, and I've been working graveyard shift at Cascade Timber Mill in Oak Ridge, Oregon for about 8 months now. If you don't know Oak Ridge, it's one of those mountain towns that exists entirely because of the timber industry. Population, maybe 3,000, surrounded by national forest on all sides. Closest real city about an hour away. The kind of place where the mill whistle still dictates the rhythm of daily life. Where 3 generations of the same family work the same jobs. Where closing the mill would mean the town dies. I took the graveyard shift because it paid an extra $2 an hour, and because I'm not married, don't have kids, and my sleep schedule was already garbage anyway. Midnight to 8 a.m., 4 days a week, running the planer and helping with equipment maintenance when things broke down. The crew was small, just 6 of us covering the whole operation. Me, the new guy, Tommy Vickers on the saw line, Frank Chen running the debarker, Eddie Sutton and Ray Martinez on material handling, and our shift supervisor, Dale Kowalski, who'd been working nights at Cascade for 32 years. The first few months were fine, routine, quiet, the kind of work where you fall into a rhythm and hours disappear. Tommy would have sports radio playing by the saws. Frank always brought thermoses of coffee he'd share. Eddie and Ray had this ongoing argument about the best fishing spots in the Willamette that had been going on for apparently 7 years. Dale would do his rounds, check the equipment logs, make sure we hit our production targets. Normal, boring, safe. The first time I noticed something off was mid-April. We were about 3 hours into the shift, around 3 a.m., and I was running a batch of 2x6s through the planer when I heard Tommy laugh at something on the radio. Nothing weird about that, except I'd heard that exact same laugh with the exact same timing the night before. And the night before that, I turned down my machine and listened closer. Sports radio at 3 a.m. is mostly replays and call-in shows, different every night, but Tommy's reactions, the timing of his laughs, his comments, the way he'd swear at the referees, it was identical to the previous nights, like a recording playing on loop. I mentioned it to Frank during our 4 a.m. break. Hey, does Tommy always listen to the same broadcast? I asked, pouring coffee from Frank's thermos. Frank looked at me over his cup. His face was neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. What do you mean? I swear I've heard him react to the same plays 3 nights in a row. Tommy likes his routines, Frank said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. You know how some guys are. He changed the subject quickly, started talking about the maintenance schedule for the debarker, but I noticed his hands were shaking slightly as he poured himself more coffee. The next night, I paid closer attention, not just to Tommy, but to everyone. Dale did his rounds at exactly 12:45 a.m., 1:30 a.m., 2:15 a.m., 3 a.m., and so on. Same route, same timing, every single night. I'd assumed that was just good supervision, staying on schedule. But when I really watched, I noticed he never actually checked anything. He'd walk the same path, pause at the same machines, nod like he was inspecting them, and move on. But his eyes never focused on the equipment. He was just going through motions. Eddie and Ray's fishing argument repeated every night at 1:20 a.m. Same beats, same jokes, Same exact phrasing. I'm telling you, the Mackenzie above Leeburg Dam beats anything on the Willamette. You're out of your damn mind, Ray. Dexter Reservoir after spring runoff, nowhere even close. Word for word, every night. And Frank brought 3 thermoses of coffee every shift and would share them during breaks, but I'd never actually seen him drink any. He'd pour it, hold the cup, bring it to his lips, but he'd never swallow. The coffee would still be in his mouth when he'd turn away, and I'd hear him spit it into the trash when he thought I wasn't looking. I started watching what everyone ate. Tommy brought a lunchbox every night. Same faded blue cooler, same Seahawks logo sticker. It would sit by the time clock for the entire 8-hour shift, unopened. Eddie had a bag of sunflower seeds he'd pull out during breaks. He'd go through the motion of eating them, putting them in his mouth, making chewing sounds, but I never saw him spit out shells. Never saw the bag get lighter. Ray would unwrap a granola bar at 5 a.m., like clockwork, would make comments about how he needed the energy, would take bites, but the granola bar would still be whole when he rewrapped it and threw it in the trash. None of them ate. Not in 8 hours. Not even water. I lasted 2 more weeks before I had to say something. I waited until Dale was in the supervisor's office doing paperwork, then approached Frank while he was running a maintenance check on the debarker. Frank, can I ask you something? He didn't look at me, kept his eyes on the machine. Sure. How long have you worked here? 18 years. You know that. His voice had that flat quality again. And you worked with the same crew every night? That's how shift work goes, Ryan. Same people, same schedule. When's the last time you took a vacation? He stopped, didn't move for about 5 seconds, then slowly turned to face me. His expression was neutral, but his eyes, there was something wrong with his eyes. They didn't track quite right, like they were seeing me but also looking past me, focused on something else. Why are you asking these questions? He said. I've noticed some things, routines, patterns, and I'm wondering if... Stop wondering. His voice was sharp, final. Do your job. Don't pay attention to anything else. That's how you stay safe here. Safe from what? He leaned in close. His breath didn't smell like anything. Not coffee, not food, not even the smell of another person breathing. Just nothing. There used to be a night crew before us, he said quietly. 6 guys, just like now. They asked too many questions, started comparing notes, started noticing patterns. What happened to them? They're not here anymore. He straightened up, went back to his maintenance check. And the thing is, Ryan, the mill never shut down. Not even for a day. Night shift kept running. Same production numbers, same everything. Think about that. He walked away before I could respond. That night, I started documenting everything. I had a small notebook I kept in my work locker, and during breaks I'd write down everything I observed. Repeated conversations, identical routines, the things that didn't add up. Dale's rounds, same route, same times, never actually inspects anything. Tommy's lunch, blue cooler, Seahawks sticker never opened. Frank's coffee, pours it, holds it, never drinks. Eddie's sunflower seeds, motion of eating, no shells, bag never empties. Ray's granola bar, unwraps, eats, rewraps, whole bar. No one drinks water. No one uses the bathroom. No one's routine ever varies. And then I noticed the biggest thing. In 8 months, I'd never seen anyone arrive at the start of shift. The mill parking lot had their vehicles when I pulled in at 11:45 p.m. 4 trucks, always the same parking spots, but I'd never seen them drive up, never seen them get out of their vehicles and walk to the building. They were just there, already inside, already at their stations when midnight hit. I decided to come early one night, arrived at 11 p.m. instead of 11:45. The parking lot was empty except for the security guard's car. I parked and waited, watching the entrance. At 11:28 p.m., the security guard drove away. His shift ended at 11:30, and apparently he left early. The lot was completely empty now. Just me, sitting in my truck, watching. At 11:43 p.m., the lights in the mill came on. Not all of them, just the ones for the night shift work areas. They flickered to life in sequence, like someone was walking through the building flipping switches, but there were no vehicles in the parking lot except mine. At 11:57 p.m., I got out of my truck and walked to the employee entrance. It was unlocked. I went inside. The break room lights were on. Frank's 3 thermoses were on the counter. Tommy's blue lunch cooler was sitting by the time clock. Eddie's sunflower seed bag was on the table. Ray's granola bar wrapper was in the exact spot he always unwrapped it, but no one was there. I walked into the main production floor. The machines were warming up, that low hum of industrial equipment coming online. The lights over each station were on. Tools were laid out. Everything was ready for the shift to start. And standing at his station, facing his saw line, was Tommy. I stopped, stared. His truck wasn't in the parking lot. I'd watched the lot the entire time, but he was here. "Tommy?" I called out. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, perfectly still, facing his equipment. I walked closer. "Tommy, hey, didn't see you come in." He turned. The movement was wrong, too smooth, like he was on a turntable instead of rotating his body naturally. And when he faced me, his expression was blank, not neutral, blank, like a mask with nothing behind it. Then he smiled. The smile was too wide, too many teeth. "Hello, Ryan," he said. His voice was Tommy's voice, but it came from the wrong place. Not from his mouth, from somewhere in his chest. "You're early tonight. Yeah, wanted to get a head start. You should stay on schedule." Still smiling. Schedules are important. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned and saw the others emerging from different parts of the production floor. Frank from the debarker area, Dale from the supervisor's office, Eddie and Ray from the loading bay, all of them moving with that same too smooth motion. All of them wearing those blank expressions that would shift into approximations of normal faces when they got closer. "You're early," Frank said. His voice had that doubled quality now, like 2 recordings playing almost in sync, but not quite. "Need to stay on schedule," Dale added. "Schedules keep things running," Eddie said. "Keep things safe," Ray finished. They formed a loose semicircle around me, not threatening, but contained, blocking the path back to the entrance. "What are you?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Night crew," Tommy said. "Same as you. Where's the real night crew? The people you're pretending to be?" They all looked at each other. That same synchronized head turn, that same too smooth motion. "They're gone," Frank said. "We're here instead." "We keep the mill running," Dale added. "Same production numbers, same quality. No one notices the difference." "I noticed," I said. "You're observant," Tommy said. "That's unfortunate." Eddie took a step closer. The last person who noticed. He tried to tell people, tried to warn the day shift, tried to call the company. Didn't work out well for him. Ray finished. "What happened to him?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "He's still here," Dale said. "On night crew, right where he belongs." They all smiled then, those 2 wide smiles, and I understood. I was looking at what was left of the previous night crew, the ones who'd asked too many questions, the ones who'd noticed the patterns. They'd been replaced, absorbed, turned into whatever these things were. "You can join us," Frank said. "Make things easier. Schedules run smoother when everyone cooperates. Or you can resist," Tommy added. "But that just makes it harder for you." "I'd rather not be part of this," I said, backing toward the loading bay. There was a personnel exit on the far side, and if I could reach it, "You don't have to be part of anything," Dale said. "You just have to not interfere. Come to work on schedule. Do your job. Don't ask questions. That's all we need from you." "And if I refuse?" The lights flickered, all of them at once. When they came back on, the 5 figures were closer. I hadn't seen them move, but they'd crossed half the distance between us. "You won't refuse," Frank said, "because you're smart enough to understand the alternative." The lights flickered again, closer. Close enough now that I could see their skin had a waxy quality in the fluorescent light. Could see that their uniforms didn't quite fit right, like costumes on frames that were almost but not quite the right size. "Midnight," Dale said. "Shift starts in 2 minutes. Be at your station, Ryan. On schedule." One more flicker. They were surrounding me now, close enough to touch. "On schedule," they said in unison. 5 voices layered together, speaking as one. I ran. Didn't think about it, just bolted toward the loading bay exit. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no shouts, just silence. I hit the door at full speed, slammed through it into the cold April night. My truck was 50 yards away across the parking lot. I sprinted for it, fumbling with my keys, expecting at any moment to feel hands on my shoulders, to hear those layered voices telling me to come back inside, to stay on schedule. I reached my truck, got in, locked the doors, started the engine. Through the mill windows, I could see them, all 5 of them standing in a line, watching me, perfectly still, perfectly synchronized. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Don't come back early. Don't ask questions. Don't tell anyone. Work your schedule or don't work at all." I sat there, engine running, staring at that message. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to drive away and never come back. Report this to the police, the company, someone. But I thought about what Frank had said. The mill never shut down, not even for a day. Same production numbers, same everything. If I reported this, who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do? Investigate? Send someone to look around during day shift when everything was normal? Find nothing wrong? Or, worse, what if the company already knew? What if this was acceptable to them, as long as production numbers stayed up? I put the truck in reverse and drove home. For 3 days, I didn't go back. Called in sick, didn't answer my phone, tried to figure out what to do. On the 4th day, I got a call from the mill's HR department, professional, polite, letting me know that if I didn't return to work within 48 hours, my position would be terminated and filled by someone else. I thought about that. Someone else. Some new person who wouldn't know the patterns, wouldn't notice the routines, who'd show up on schedule and do their job and gradually realize something was wrong. But by then it would be too late. Or maybe they'd notice sooner, ask questions sooner, and end up like the previous crew. I went back on my regular schedule, showed up at 11:45 p.m., clocked in at midnight, went to my station and did my job. The night crew was there. Same routines, same conversations. Tommy's sports radio, Frank's coffee he never drank, Dale's rounds, Eddie and Ray's fishing argument. No one mentioned what happened. No one acknowledged I'd been gone. It was like those 3 days never existed. I learned to stop paying attention, stop noticing, stop asking questions. That was 2 years ago. I'm still on night shift at Cascade Timber Mill. Same schedule, same crew. I do my job. I meet my targets. I stay on schedule. And I never, ever show up early. Sometimes I wonder what they are, where they came from, why they need to pretend to be human workers in a lumber mill. in the middle of nowhere, but I've learned that wandering is dangerous. The mill runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Day shift, swing shift, graveyard shift, all of them hitting their numbers, maintaining efficiency, keeping Cascade Timber profitable enough that no one looks too close at how the work gets done. I know the day shift guys, seen their photos in the break room from company events, started paying attention to their routines too, and I'm pretty sure at least 2 of them never eat lunch, never drink their coffee, never vary their patterns. I think whatever's on night shift, it's spreading, learning, getting better at pretending, and eventually, maybe the whole mill will run like this. Perfect efficiency, perfect consistency, no sick days, no vacation requests, no human error, just the schedule, running forever. If you work night shift anywhere, a mill, a factory, a warehouse, pay attention to the people around you. Watch what they eat. Listen to their conversations. Notice if patterns repeat a little too perfectly. And if you start seeing things that don't add up, don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Don't show up early trying to catch them in the act. Just do your job, stay on schedule, and if you can't live with that, find a different job. Because some workplaces have been optimized in ways the employee handbook doesn't mention. I still work at Cascade, still run my planer, still hit my numbers, and every night at 3 a.m., I hear Tommy laugh at the same play, and I don't say a word. The rental agreement had a clause I laughed at. Tenant must remain indoors between sunset and sunrise. I stopped laughing the first night I looked out my window at 3 a.m. My name is Kyle Brennan, and I'm an HVAC technician. I moved to Tierra Roja, New Mexico in June of 2023 for a contract job with a regional maintenance company that services everything from Albuquerque down to the border towns. Tierra Roja is one of those places you pass through without noticing. Population around 1,200, sitting in a valley between rust-red mesas, surrounded by scrub desert and not much else. One main street, one grocery store, 2 gas stations, 3 churches. A kind of town where everybody knows everybody and strangers get noticed. I'm not much for small town life, but the pay was good and the cost of living was cheap. Found a rental house on the edge of town through a property management company out of Santa Fe. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, central air that actually worked, which was more than I could say for half the units I'd been servicing. Rent was $600 a month, utilities included, which seemed almost too good. Should have known there'd be a catch. The property manager emailed me the lease agreement, and buried in section 7, subsection C, was this: tenant agrees to remain indoors between sunset and sunrise. Exterior doors must be locked during these hours. Do not respond to knocks or calls from outside after dark. I called the property manager, lady named Patricia Valdez. Hey, quick question about clause 7C, I said. The curfew thing, is that enforceable? Long pause. It's strongly recommended. Recommended by who? The town. Look, Mr. Brennan, Tierra Roja is a safe community, but it's also very traditional. People keep certain customs. If you can respect that, you'll do fine. What happens if I don't? Another pause. Longer this time. Just respect it, please. The way she said please made it clear the conversation was over. I signed the lease anyway. I mean, I'm not much for going out at night anyway. Most of my service calls were during business hours, and after a day of crawling through attics and dealing with busted compressors, I was usually happy to stay home. I moved in on a Saturday. Drove my truck loaded with everything I owned, which wasn't much. Some furniture, my tools, clothes, basics. The house was exactly as advertised. Clean, functional, nothing special but nothing wrong. What I noticed first was the neighborhood. Every single house had their porch lights on. It was 2 p.m. Full daylight, 90 degrees, and every porch light on the street was burning. I figured maybe they were on timers and nobody bothered to adjust them. The second thing I noticed was the doors. Heavy. Every house had solid wood or metal security doors in addition to their regular doors. Deadbolts, chain locks. Some houses had bars on the windows. For a town with supposedly zero crime, everybody was awfully worried about break-ins. I spent the day unpacking and getting settled. Around 6:30 p.m., the sun started dropping behind the western mesa, painting everything in orange and purple. Beautiful. I grabbed a beer and sat on my front porch to watch. That's when I noticed the street was empty. People who'd been out watering lawns, washing cars, sitting on porches, they all went inside. Not rushed, not panicked, just deliberately, like clockwork. By 7 p.m., when the last light disappeared behind the hills, every house on the street was sealed up tight, doors closed, curtains drawn, porch lights blazing. I was the only person still outside. I stayed on my porch until about 7:30, finished my beer, and went inside. Locked the door out of habit, turned on the TV, and tried not to think about how weird the whole thing felt. Around midnight, I was still awake, scrolling on my phone, when I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, walking down the middle of the street. I got up and looked out my front window. The porch lights from all the houses created these pools of harsh yellow light, but between them were deep shadows, and in those shadows, something was walking. I couldn't make out details, just a shape, human-sized, moving from shadow to shadow, staying just outside the reach of the lights. It would pause at each house, stand there for maybe 30 seconds, then move to the next one. When it reached my house, it stopped at the end of my walkway, stood there, completely still. I pressed closer to the window, trying to see it better, but the angle was wrong and my porch light was too bright. It created a glare that made everything beyond it darker. After about a minute, it moved on, continued down the street. I watched until it disappeared around the corner. I told myself it was just someone walking home. Late night stroll. Nothing weird about that, except the way it moved. Too smooth, too deliberate, and the way it had paused at every house, like it was checking them. The next morning, I asked my neighbor about it. A lady named Rosa Gutierrez lived 2 houses down. She was in her 70s, had lived in Tierra Roja her whole life. Mrs. Gutierrez, is it normal for people to walk around town at night? She was watering her flower boxes. She stopped, looked at me, with this expression I couldn't read. No, she said. Nobody walks at night in Tierra Roja. I saw someone last night, around midnight. She set down her watering can. You saw something walking, not someone. And you need to stay inside after dark, Kyle. Lock your doors. Don't look out your windows. Don't respond if something knocks. If something knocks? What do you mean? Something. Just follow the rules, she said. Your landlord told you the rules. Follow them. She went inside before I could ask anything else. I started paying attention after that, watching the patterns. Every single person in Tierra Roja was inside by sunset. No exceptions. The one gas station that advertised 24 hours actually closed at 7 p.m. despite what the sign said. The diner on Main Street locked up at 6:30. Even the sheriff's department had a note on the door. After hours emergencies, call 911. Do not come to the station after dark. I asked around, carefully. Nobody wanted to talk about it directly, but I pieced together the unspoken rules. Inside by sunset, no exceptions, doors locked, deadbolts engaged, porch lights on all night. Don't look out windows after dark. Don't respond to knocks or voices. Don't go outside until sunrise. For 2 weeks, I followed the rules. Stayed inside. locked my doors, minded my own business. But every night, I heard the footsteps, slow, methodical, walking the streets, pausing at houses. Sometimes, I'd hear other sounds too, scratching at doors, tapping on windows, and voices. The voices were the worst part. They sounded like people, like my neighbors. I'd hear Mrs. Gutierrez's voice calling for help from the street, or the voice of Luis, the guy who ran the hardware store, asking if anyone was home. Or children's voices, laughing and playing at 2 a.m. in the middle of the street. The first time I heard a child crying outside my door, I almost opened it. My hand was on the deadbolt when I remembered the rules. I stood there, listening to this kid sob and call for their mom, and I did nothing. The crying stopped after about 5 minutes. I heard footsteps walk away. In the morning, I asked Mrs. Gutierrez if any kids in the neighborhood were missing. No, she said. Why? I heard a child crying outside my house last night. Her face went pale. You didn't open the door. No, Good. Don't ever open the door. 3 weeks in, I had a service call that ran late. Commercial unit at a medical clinic in a town 30 miles away. Compressor failure. Had to source a replacement part. Whole thing took way longer than expected. By the time I finished, it was 8:30 p.m. I called my scheduler. Hey, I'm going to be getting back after dark. That going to be a problem. Getting back where? She asked. Tierra Roja? My house? Long pause. Kyle, where are you now? About 20 miles out. Pull over. Find a motel. Don't drive into Tierra Roja after sunset. I'm not staying in a motel when my house is 20 minutes away. Kyle. I hung up. Started driving. I reached the town limits at 9:15 p.m. The street lights were on, porch lights burning on every house, but the streets were completely empty. No cars, no people, nothing moving. I drove slowly down Main Street toward my neighborhood. Everything was closed, locked up tight. The only sound was my engine and my tires on the pavement. That's when I noticed the figure. It was standing in the middle of the intersection ahead of me, human-shaped, perfectly still. I slowed down, expecting it to move. It didn't. I stopped about 20 feet away, put my truck in park, tried to get a better look at it through the windshield. It was wearing clothes, jeans, a button-up shirt, work boots, but something about the proportions was wrong. The arms too long, the neck too thin, and it wasn't breathing. No rise and fall of the chest. No movement at all. I honked my horn. It didn't react. I put the truck in reverse and started backing up, planning to take a different route to my street. The figure's head turned to follow me. Not its body, just its head. Rotated 180 degrees, tracking my movement. I reversed faster. The figure took a step toward me, then another, moving with that same too-smooth gait I'd seen from my window. I shifted back into drive and gunned it, swerving around it. In my rearview mirror, I watched it turn and start walking in my direction. Not running, just walking, but covering ground faster than it should have been able to. I reached my street, pulled into my driveway, and ran for my front door. Got my keys out with shaking hands, unlocked the deadbolt, got inside, slammed the door, and locked it behind me. I stood in my dark living room, breathing hard, and heard footsteps coming up my walkway. Slow, deliberate. They stopped at my front door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 precise knocks. Pause. 3 more knocks. Then a voice. My voice. Coming from the other side of the door. Hey, it's me. I'm locked out. He opened the door. My own voice. Perfect inflection. Perfect tone. Like a recording of me asking for help. I know you're in there. Just open the door real quick. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Kyle, Open the door. The doorknob turned, slowly, testing the lock. It rattled against the deadbolt. I can hear you breathing. I know you're right there. I backed away from the door, moved into my bedroom, closed and locked that door too. From the front of the house, I heard window tapping. Systematic, every window. Tap, tap, tap. Moving around the perimeter of the house. Then scratching, long, dragging sounds against the siding, against the doors, against the windows, and voices. So many voices. My mother's voice calling my name, my ex-girlfriend's voice asking to talk, my boss's voice saying there was an emergency, children's voices crying, old voices, young voices, men and women, all of them calling out, asking to be let in, demanding entry, pleading, threatening, cajoling. I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand, trying to decide if I should call 911, but what would I say? That something was outside my house making noises? That it sounded like people but wasn't? The scratching and tapping and voices continued until about 4 a.m. Then, gradually, they stopped. The footsteps walked away. I heard them recede down the street. I didn't sleep, just sat there until sunrise. When morning came, I went outside to check for damage. Scratches on my doors, on my window frames, long dragging marks in the dirt around the foundation of my house, and footprints, hundreds of them, all over my yard, my walkway, my porch. They looked like human footprints, but the tread pattern was wrong, and they were all exactly the same size, exactly the same depth, like they'd been made by something wearing the same shoes on both feet. Mrs. Gutierrez was outside, saw me examining the marks. "You came home after dark," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "Don't do it again." "What are those things?" She looked at the footprints, looked at the scratches on my door. "We don't have a name for them. They've always been here, long before the town was built. We just coexist. They have the night, we have the day. As long as everyone stays inside after sunset, there's no problem. What happens if someone goes out at night? Some people have, over the years. They don't come back." She paused. "Or they come back wrong." "Come back wrong how?" "They look right, sound right, but something's off. They move wrong, talk wrong, and they always try to get others to come outside at night to break the rules." I thought about the figure in the intersection, the way its head had turned. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Long as anyone can remember. Probably longer. It's why the town stays small. Why people don't move here. Why those of us who live here don't talk about it. What would we say? Who would believe us? The property management company knows. They put it in the lease. Everyone who needs to know, knows. And everyone who doesn't need to know, well, they usually don't last long enough for it to matter." She went back inside, left me standing in my yard, looking at the evidence of something that wasn't supposed to exist. I stayed in Tierra Roja for 6 more months, finished my contract, never broke curfew again, never opened my door after dark, never responded to the voices, no matter how convincing they were. Some nights were worse than others. Some nights, I'd hear dozens of them walking the streets. Some nights, my house would be surrounded for hours, scratching, knocking, calling out, and voices of people I knew and people I'd never met. I learned to sleep with earplugs, learned to ignore the sounds, learned to treat sunset like a hard deadline and plan my life around it. The worst night was in December. I heard my father's voice outside my bedroom window. My father, who died 3 years earlier. His voice, exact and perfect, asking me to let him in because he was cold and needed help. I lay in bed, tears running down my face, listening to my dead father beg for help, and I did nothing because I knew it wasn't him. Knew it was something wearing his voice like a costume, trying to trick me into opening a door or window. After about an hour, the voice changed, became angry, accusatory, telling me I was a coward, telling me I'd always been a disappointment, saying things my real father would never have said. That's when I knew for sure it wasn't him. It was just something that had plucked his voice out of my memory and was using it to hurt me, to manipulate me, to make me angry enough to throw open the door and confront it. I didn't. I just lay there until it gave up and moved on. When my contract ended in January, I packed up my truck and left. Drove out of Tierra Roja at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, watched the town disappear in my rearview mirror, and felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months. I'm back in Colorado now, working normal service calls in normal towns where people walk around at night and nothing mimics voices, and the only things knocking on doors after dark are neighbors or delivery drivers. But I still lock my doors at sunset, still turn on my porch light, still feel uneasy when I hear footsteps outside after dark, because I know now that there are places in this country where the rules are different, where something old and patient and hungry has claimed the darkness, and the only way to survive is to respect the boundaries. Tierra Roja isn't the only town like that. I've heard stories from other service techs, other travelers, towns in West Texas, in Arizona, in Utah and Nevada. Small places, isolated places, where everyone's inside by dark and no one talks about why. If you ever move to a small town and the lease agreement has weird clauses about curfews, or you notice everyone disappears at sunset, or your neighbors warn you to stay inside at night, listen to them. Don't test the rules. Don't assume you're smarter or braver or more rational than the people who've lived there for generations. They have those rules for a reason. They've paid the price to learn them, and if you're smart, you'll follow them without needing to learn why. Some boundaries exist to protect us from what's on the other side. Respect them. If you've lived in a town like Tierra Roja, or if you've experienced something similar, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and hit subscribe. Knowing these places exist, knowing other people have encountered the same things, it helps. It means we're not crazy. It means we survived something real. Stay inside after dark. Lock your doors. And don't answer when something calls your name. I found the pattern in a filing cabinet that hadn't been opened since 1994. 7 years, 7 victims. 7 times my department stopped searching after exactly 48 hours. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been a deputy with the Lewis County Sheriff's Department in Helmville, Montana for 5 years. If you don't know Helmville, that's because there's only about 60 people who actually live in town, maybe 300 in the wider valley area. We're cattle country, bordered by the Blackfoot Clearwater Wildlife Management Area to the north and the Garnet Range to the south. Mountains, forests, and not much else for 50 miles in any direction. I took the job because I grew up in Great Falls and wanted to get back to Montana after spending 4 years doing security work in Seattle. Small town law enforcement seemed like a good fit. Quiet, straightforward, the kind of place where your biggest problems are drunk driving, domestic disputes, and tourists doing stupid things in bear country. For the most part, that was accurate. Until October of 2023, when Sheriff Bill Carver asked me to digitize our old case files. Everything from 1985 forward needs to be scanned and entered into the state database, he said, dropping 3 boxes of files on my desk. County's finally dragging us into the 21st century. It should keep you busy for a few weeks. The boxes were dusty, heavy, filed in no particular order that I could determine. I started sorting them by year, then by case type, trying to create some organizational system before I began scanning. That's when I noticed the missing persons reports. October 1987. Hiker named Brian Kowalski, male, age 32, reported missing by his girlfriend after failing to return from a solo day hike in the Garnet Range. Last known location, Trailhead parking area for the Crystal Creek Trail. Search conducted for 48 hours. No trace found. Case suspended. October 1994. Camper named Sarah Voss, female, age 28, reported missing by her hiking partner after she went to gather firewood and never returned. Last known location, backcountry campsite, approximately 6 miles up the Crystal Creek Trail. Search conducted for 48 hours. No trace found. Case suspended. October 2001. Hunter named Robert Hayes, male, age 45, reported missing by his brother after failing to meet at a predetermined location. Last known location, hunting area north of Crystal Creek Trail. Search conducted for 48 hours. No trace found. Case suspended. I pulled more files. Kept going back. October 2008. Hiker named Jennifer Walsh, female, age 36, reported missing after her vehicle was found at the Crystal Creek Trailhead with her gear still inside. Search conducted for 48 hours. No trace found. Case suspended. October 2015. Backpacker named Thomas Rivera. Thomas Fletcher. Male, age 29, reported missing after sending a text message to his roommate saying he'd be back by nightfall. Never returned. Last known location, Crystal Creek Trail area. Search conducted for 48 hours. No trace found. Case suspended. 5 cases. All in October. All near the same trail system. All separated by exactly 7 years. I sat back in my chair and stared at the pattern. Could be coincidence. October is hunting season, peak fall colors, good weather before snow, popular time for people to be in the backcountry. And Crystal Creek Trail is one of the more accessible routes in the area, but the 7-year spacing was weird. And the fact that every search was suspended after exactly 48 hours, that wasn't standard procedure. Missing persons cases, especially in wilderness areas, usually get at least 72 to 96 hours of active searching, sometimes longer if weather permits. I checked the current date, October 12th, 2023. 7 years since the last disappearance. I took the files to Sheriff Carver's office. He was on the phone, waved me in, finished his call. "What's up, Jake?" I laid the files on his desk. I found something while organizing the archives. Missing persons cases. 5 of them. All in October. All near Crystal Creek Trail. All exactly 7 years apart. The last one was 2015. He looked at the files. His expression didn't change. Okay. Sir, that's a clear pattern. And we're currently in October of 2023. If the pattern holds, it's a coincidence, he said. Flat. Final. 5 cases with the exact same characteristics isn't a coincidence. Jake, I appreciate the initiative, but we get missing persons reports every year. People get lost in the woods. It happens. Sometimes they're found, sometimes they're not. Every case was suspended after exactly 48 hours. That's not standard procedure. He leaned back in his chair, studied me for a moment. How long have you been with the department? 5 years. You know that. And in those 5 years, have we had any missing persons cases in the Crystal Creek area? I thought about it. No. Exactly. Because the pattern you're seeing isn't a pattern. It's just data points that happen to line up. If you look hard enough at any set of records, you'll find coincidences. With respect, sir, I think this warrants further investigation. At minimum, we should increase patrols in that area, maybe post warning signs. No. He picked up the files and handed them back to me. Finish digitizing the records. Don't waste time chasing ghosts. I left his office, but I couldn't let it go. That night, I went home and mapped out all 5 disappearances, printed satellite images of the Crystal Creek Trail area, marked the last known locations, all of them clustered within a 3-mile radius, all of them in the same section of the Garnet Range, where the trail runs along a steep-sided valley before opening into a meadow system. I pulled weather records for each October. All 5 disappearances happened during the same 2-week window, between October 10th and October 24th. Clear weather, good visibility, no storms, no early snow, ideal hiking conditions. The current date was October 12th. We were in the window. The next morning, I drove out to the Crystal Creek trailhead. It's about 20 miles from Helmville, accessed by a Forest Service road that's maintained but rough. The parking area can hold maybe 8 vehicles. There were 2 cars there when I arrived. A Subaru with Colorado plates and a pickup truck with local Montana plates. I wrote down both license numbers, checked the trail register. The Subaru belonged to a couple from Boulder doing a 3-day backpacking trip. The truck belonged to someone named Andrew Wright from Lincoln, doing a day hike, planned return by 4 p.m. I hiked up the trail about 2 miles, just to get a feel for the terrain. Dense forest on both sides, creek running parallel, well-maintained path. Nothing unusual, nothing that would explain why 5 people over 35 years had vanished without a trace in this specific area. I got back to my vehicle around noon. Both cars were still there, normal. I drove back to Helmville, filed my patrol report, and tried to focus on regular duties, but I kept checking the clock. At 5 p.m., I called the Forest Service to ask if they'd had any communication from hikers in the Crystal Creek area. Nothing. At 6 p.m., I drove back to the trailhead. The Subaru was gone. The pickup truck was still there. Andrew Wright's planned return time had been 4 p.m. It was now past 6, getting dark. I called it in. Sheriff Carver authorized a search, but told me to wait until morning unless I had evidence of immediate danger. Standard procedure for overdue hikers. Most of them just lose track of time or underestimate distances. I waited in the parking lot until full dark, hoping to see headlamp lights coming down the trail. Nothing. The next morning, a search team assembled. Me, Sheriff Carver, 2 other deputies, and 4 volunteers from the local search and rescue unit. We started at first light, split into pairs, worked our way up the trail. Around 10 a.m., we found Andrew Wright's day pack. It was sitting on a flat rock about 4 miles up the trail, right where the forest opens into the meadow. The pack was neatly placed, not dropped or discarded. All his gear was inside. Water, snacks, first aid kit, rain jacket. His wallet and phone were in the outer pocket. No signs of struggle, no blood, no disturbed ground. Just the pack, sitting there like he'd set it down to take a break and never picked it back up. We searched the surrounding area for 3 hours, called his name, looked for footprints, broken branches, any indication of which direction he'd gone. Found nothing. At 2 p.m., Sheriff Carver called off the search. "We'll resume tomorrow morning," he said. "Let's get back to town, file reports, contact his family." "We still have 4 hours of daylight," I said. "We should keep searching. We've covered the primary area. Expanding the search grid requires more personnel and resources. We'll reassess in the morning." We packed up and hiked back to the trailhead. I was the last one down, kept looking over my shoulder, hoping to see Andrew Wright emerge from the tree line. He didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the pattern, about the fact that we had found his pack exactly where the forest opened into the meadow, about the way it had been placed, not dropped. At 2 a.m., I got up and looked at the case files again, pulled the reports for the previous 5 disappearances. Brian Kowalski, 1987. Day pack found on a flat rock near the meadow. Sarah Voss, 1994. Backpack found at the edge of the meadow clearing. Robert Hayes, 2001. Hunting pack found on a fallen log at meadow's edge. Jennifer Walsh, 2008. Day pack found on a boulder near the meadow. Thomas Fletcher, 2015. Backpack found on a tree stump at the meadow boundary. Every single one. Same location. Packs found neatly placed at the edge of the meadow, and every search suspended after 48 hours. I drove to the sheriff's office at 6 a.m. Sheriff Carver was already there. "We need to talk about the pattern," I said. He sighed. "Jake, every victim left their pack at the exact same spot. The edge of the meadow, all of them neatly placed, like they set them down deliberately. That's not people getting lost. That's not animal attacks. That's something else. What are you suggesting?" "I don't know, but I know we're gonna find Andrew Wright's body, or we're not gonna find him at all, and in either case, we're gonna stop searching after 48 hours, just like we did with the others, and I want to know why." Sheriff Carver was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Close the door." I closed it. "What I'm about to tell you stays in this office," he said. 28 years ago, when I was a deputy just like you, we had a missing person case. October of 1995, hiker named Michael Patterson. He disappeared on the Crystal Creek Trail. "That's not in the files," I said. "No, because we found him. 3 days after he went missing, we found him walking down Highway 12 about 15 miles from the trailhead, barefoot, hypothermic, dehydrated. We got him to the hospital, got him stabilized." "What happened to him?" "He couldn't remember anything after entering the meadow. Said he set down his pack to take pictures, and the next thing he knew, he was on the highway. 3 days gone, but he had no memory of it. No injuries, no explanation." "Did you investigate?" "We tried, but 2 weeks later, Michael Patterson drove his truck into the Clark Fork River, drowned himself, left a note that just said, 'I can't go back.' I felt cold." "You think something in that meadow?" "I think," Sheriff Carver interrupted, "that there are places in these mountains that people shouldn't go. I think the land here is old, and some parts of it don't belong to us. And I think that every 7 years, something in that meadow takes a person. Just one, always in October. And if we're smart, we let it happen, and we don't ask questions." "That's insane." "Is it?" "In 1988, we tried an extended search, brought in teams from 3 counties, spent a week combing that area, lost 2 volunteers. They went into the meadow and never came out. After that, we established the 48-hour rule. We search the perimeter, we document what we find, and then we stop." "You're telling me the department has been covering up a serial..." "What? A serial disappearance? For 40 years? "I'm telling you that sometimes the cost of finding answers is higher than the cost of accepting mystery. 6 people in 40 years. That's the price. And if we keep that number at 6 by respecting boundaries, then that's what we do." I stared at him. "Andrew Wright is still out there. Maybe. Or maybe he's already gone. Either way, we're not sending anyone else into that meadow. I'm going back," I said. "I'm going to search it properly." "No, you're not." "That's an order, Deputy." I left his office, took a personal day, drove back to the Crystal Creek trailhead with my own gear. The trail was empty. I hiked fast, reached the meadow in under 2 hours. The area was beautiful. About 40 acres of open grassland, surrounded by dense pine forest. Mountains rising on 3 sides. A creek ran through the middle, wildflowers still blooming despite the season. Perfect. Andrew Wright's pack was exactly where we'd left it. I stood at the edge of the tree line and looked across the meadow. Nothing seemed wrong. No bad smells, no weird sounds, no obvious dangers. Just an open space in the forest. But something about it felt off, like the air was thicker here. like the light didn't quite reach the center of the meadow the way it should. I took one step into the grass. Immediately, I felt it, a pulling sensation, not physical, more like a suggestion, a gentle insistence that I should keep walking, that there was something in the center of the meadow I needed to see. I took another step. The pulling got stronger. It wasn't uncomfortable. Actually, it felt good, like coming home, like finding something I'd been looking for my whole life. 3 more steps. The forest behind me seemed farther away than it should be. The meadow seemed bigger. The center seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves on pavement, but it was October and cold. I heard a voice, soft, familiar. It sounded like my mother, who died when I was 16. "Jake, come here. I need to show you something." I stopped. My mother's voice, exactly her voice, the way she used to call me in for dinner when I was playing in the yard. "Jake, honey, come on, just a little further." I looked down. I'd walked maybe 20 feet into the meadow, but when I looked back at the tree line, it seemed impossibly far away, 100 yards at least. That wasn't right. I'd only taken a few steps. "Jake." "No," I said out loud. "You're not my mother." The voice stopped. The pulling sensation intensified. Now it wasn't gentle. It was insistent, demanding. My legs wanted to keep walking. My mind was screaming at them to stop. I turned around, started walking back toward the trees. Each step was harder than the last, like walking through waist-deep water. The forest stayed distant, not getting any closer. Behind me, I heard footsteps, multiple sets. Walking through the grass, I didn't look back, kept pushing toward the tree line. My mother's voice again, but different now, layered with other voices. Men and women, young and old, all speaking in unison. "You can't leave. You're supposed to stay. It's been 7 years. Someone has to stay." 20 more steps. The trees were getting closer. I could see individual branches now. The voices behind me got louder, angrier. "We waited. We're hungry. You came into the meadow. The meadow gets to keep you." 10 more steps. I could see the path now. Andrew Wright's pack on the rock. Something grabbed my ankle. I fell forward, hit the ground hard. Looked back. There was nothing there. No hand, no person, nothing visible. But I couldn't move my leg. It was held by something I couldn't see. The grass around me started to move, not from wind, moving on its own, wrapping around my legs, my arms, pulling me back toward the center of the meadow. I grabbed my knife from my belt, cut the grass. It bled. Not sap, not plant fluid, blood, dark and thick. The grass recoiled. The invisible grip released. I scrambled forward, crawling now, dragging myself toward the tree line. I crossed the boundary. The moment I hit the forest floor, everything stopped. The pulling sensation vanished. The voices cut off. The meadow behind me looked normal again, just grass and flowers and sunshine. I lay there for maybe 5 minutes, breathing hard, trying to process what just happened. Then I grabbed Andrew Wright's pack and hiked back to the trailhead as fast as I could. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Carver took one look at my face and knew. "You went into the meadow," he said. "Yeah. Did it let you leave?" "Barely." He nodded. "You're lucky. Most people don't come back out once they go in, and the ones who do." He trailed off, thinking about Michael Patterson. "What is it?" I asked. "What's in that meadow?" "I don't know. Something old. Something that's been here longer than the town, longer than the county, probably longer than humans have been in these mountains. It takes one person every 7 years. Just one. And if we respect that boundary, it leaves everyone else alone. We can't just let it keep taking people. What's your alternative? Close the trail? How do we explain that? Put up signs saying beware of supernatural entity in the meadow? send people to investigate and lose them too? The Forest Service won't close a trail based on superstition, and even if they did, someone would go in anyway. Hunters, hikers, people who ignore signs. There has to be something we can do. There is. We document the disappearance. We search for 48 hours. We file the report. And we don't send anyone else into that meadow. That's how we keep the count at 1 instead of 5 or 10. I wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was a better solution. But I had felt that pull, heard those voices, seen the grass bleed. Andrew Wright was declared missing. His family was notified. The case was suspended after 48 hours. His truck was towed from the trailhead. His pack was logged into evidence. 7 years from now, in October of 2030, someone else will go into that meadow and will search for 48 hours, and will find their pack at the edge of the clearing, and will stop searching, because that's the agreement, that's the price the land demands for letting us exist here. I think about leaving, getting a job somewhere else, somewhere flat, where the mountains don't hide things older than we can understand. But someone has to know about this place. Someone has to maintain the boundary. Someone has to make sure we don't send in teams of volunteers who won't come back. So I stay. I do my job. And every October, I drive past the Crystal Creek trailhead, and I make sure no one's parked there after dark. If you hike in wilderness areas, especially in October, pay attention to the places that feel wrong, the clearings that seem too perfect, the meadows where the light looks strange. If you feel a pull to walk into the center of an open space, to investigate something that doesn't quite make sense, resist it, turn around, leave. Some places are old, some places have rules we don't understand, and some places take payment we're not willing to give. Stay on the trails. Don't investigate strange clearings. And if you find a pack sitting on a rock with no owner in sight, leave it there and walk away. The stone marker was 3 feet into the wrong property line. My job was to move it. Nobody mentioned my job was also keeping something on the other side of it. My name is Garrett Sullivan, and I'm a licensed land surveyor working out of Austin, Texas. I've been doing this for 11 years, measuring property lines, verifying boundaries, resolving disputes between neighbors who swear their fence is in the right place when the deed says otherwise. It's technical work, detail-oriented, and usually pretty boring. You show up with your GPS equipment and your total station, you take measurements, you compare them to county records, and you tell people where their actual property line is. Most of the time, people don't like the answer, but numbers don't lie. In August of 2023, I got contracted by Caprock County in West Texas to resurvey a section of land they were planning to lease for a cell tower expansion. The county needed updated measurements to verify property boundaries before they could approve the construction permits. Standard stuff. They were paying well, and I had a gap in my schedule, so I took the job. Caprock County is out past Lubbock, high plains country, where West Texas starts to flatten out into nothing. The county seat is a town called Silverton. The population maybe 600. The area they wanted surveyed was about 12 miles outside town, ranch land that had been in the same family for 4 generations before being sold to the county in 2018. I drove out on a Tuesday morning. August in West Texas is brutal. 103 degrees by 10 a.m. Sun beating down with no shade. Heat coming up off the caliche roads in waves you could see. I had my truck loaded with equipment, Trimble GPS system, robotic total station, range pole, stakes, flagging tape, and about 2 gallons of water. The property was accessible by a caliche ranch road that turned to dirt about 3 miles in. The county had given me a lockbox code for the gate. I let myself in, drove another mile to where the survey boundary started, and got to work. The first thing I noticed was the stone markers. Most property boundaries in Texas are marked with iron rods, wooden stakes, or concrete monuments. These were stones, big ones. Rough-cut limestone blocks, about 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, sunk deep into the ground. They were old, weathered, covered in lichen, edges worn smooth by wind and time. I checked my county records. According to the deed maps, the property line should run straight north-south along a fence line, but the stone markers were offset about 3 feet east of where the records said they should be. That's not unusual. Old surveys were less precise, done with chains and compasses instead of GPS. Boundaries drift over time as markers settle or get moved. My job was to establish the correct legal boundary based on the current deed description, which meant the stone markers needed to be relocated or replaced. I set up my GPS base station and started taking measurements. The stone markers formed a clear line running for about half a mile across the property, maybe 12 of them total, evenly spaced. Every single one was 3 feet east of the legal boundary. I was marking my 4th correction point when a truck pulled up. Old Ford F-250. Sun-faded red, Texas plates. A man got out. 60s, weathered face, wearing work clothes and a straw cowboy hat. "Help you with something?" he asked. "Not hostile, but not friendly either. I am the surveyor the county hired," I said. "Garrett Sullivan. Just doing boundary verification for the cell tower project." He looked at my equipment, looked at the stone marker I was standing next to. "You planning to move those stones? They're 3 feet off the legal property line. County needs accurate boundaries for the lease agreement. Those stones been there longer than any deed," he said. "My granddad's granddad put those in place. Before there was a county, before there was a property line. I understand they're old, but legally they're in the wrong position. I'll mark the correct boundary and the county can decide whether to move them or replace them." He stared at me for a long moment. "Son, those stones aren't property markers. They're boundary markers. Different thing. I'm not sure I follow. Property is what people own. Boundaries are what keeps things separated. Those stones mark a boundary that needs to stay where it is." I'd dealt with superstitious ranchers before. Lots of rural folks have family stories about why certain things have to be a certain way. I appreciate the history, but I have a job to do. County records show the property line here. I pointed at my GPS reading. The stones are there. I'm just documenting the discrepancy. "Don't move those stones," he said. Flat, direct. "Don't move them. Don't dig them up. Don't replace them. Leave them exactly where they are." "Sir, I'm not planning to move them personally. That's for the county to decide. I'm just... You marked that property line wrong. You put new stakes inside those stones. You're going to create a gap, and things will get through." "Things?" He didn't answer. Just got back in his truck and drove away. I watched him go, then went back to work. By the end of the day, I'd mapped the entire boundary. The stone markers were consistently 3 feet east of the legal line for the full half-mile distance. I documented everything, took photos, generated a preliminary report for the county. The next morning, I got a call from the county planning director, a woman named Sandra Pruitt. "Mr. Sullivan, I reviewed your preliminary findings. The stone markers are all offset." "Yes, ma'am." 3 feet east of the deed boundary. Not uncommon for older surveys, but it'll need to be corrected before you can finalize the lease. "Can you relocate them to the proper line?" "I can stake the proper line. Moving the actual stones would require heavy equipment. They're big and they're set deep. We need this resolved before the construction company can break ground. Can you handle the relocation as part of your contract?" I thought about the old rancher's warning, thought about dismissing it as superstition. "I can do it," I said. "I'll need to rent a backhoe. But yeah, I can move them." "Do it. Add it to your invoice. I need this wrapped up by end of week." 2 days later, I was back on the property with the rented mini excavator. I decided to move the stones one at a time, relocate them to the correct boundary line, and reset them. Preserve the historical markers while fixing the legal discrepancy. I started with the northernmost stone, positioned the excavator, extended the arm, and started digging around the base. The stone went down deeper than I expected. I had to dig almost 4 feet before I could get the bucket under it. When I finally lifted it, something was underneath. Bones. Animal bones, I thought at first, but they were arranged deliberately. A pattern. A circle of small bones surrounding a larger skull. Coyote, maybe, or a large dog. And in the center of the circle, scratched into the bedrock beneath where the stone had sat, were symbols. Not English, not Spanish, something older. I took photos. Told myself it was probably some old ranching ritual. Maybe Native American, maybe early settler superstition. Ranchers used to bury things at property corners for luck or protection. I lifted the stone, drove it 3 feet west, and reset it at the correct property line. Filled in the old hole. Moved on to the next marker. Same thing. Bones underneath. Same pattern. Same symbols carved into the rock beneath. By the time I finished moving the 5th stone, the sun was setting. I'd planned to finish all 12 that day, but the excavator work was taking longer than expected and I was exhausted from the heat. I packed up, drove back to my motel in Silverton, and crashed. That night, I had dreams. Not normal dreams. Vivid, intense, like memories that weren't mine. I dreamed I was running across open prairie under a full moon, running on 4 legs, chasing something, hungry. I woke up at 3 a.m. covered in sweat, heart pounding, checked my phone, 5 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, no voicemails. I tried to go back to sleep, couldn't, kept feeling like something was outside my motel room, kept hearing scratching at the door, but every time I looked through the peephole, nothing was there. At sunrise, I got a call from Sandra Pruitt. "Mr. Sullivan, I got a complaint from a local resident about your work on the property. He says you moved boundary stones that were supposed to stay in place." I moved them to the correct property line, yes. That's what you hired me to do. He's claiming there's some kind of, I don't know, historical or cultural significance to the original placement. Says moving them is dangerous. With respect, ma'am, I'm following the county deed records and your instructions. If there's a historical preservation issue, that should have been flagged before you contracted the survey work. Long pause. Continue with the project, but document everything. Photos, measurements, the works. If this becomes a legal issue, I need a complete record. I drove back to the property. The moment I got out of my truck, something felt wrong. The air was too still. No wind, no birds, no sound at all except the engine cooling and my boots on the dirt. The 5 stones I'd moved were exactly where I'd placed them, but the ground around them looked disturbed, like something had been digging. Scratch marks in the caliche, deep gouges, wider than my hand. I checked the stones I hadn't moved yet. The ground around those was undisturbed. I told myself it was coyotes or feral dogs. West Texas has lots of both, but coyotes don't dig in perfectly straight lines radiating out from a specific point. I fired up the excavator and moved 3 more stones. Same ritual beneath each one. Bones, symbols, deliberate placement. By 2 p.m., I had 8 of the 12 relocated. That's when I heard it. Howling. Multiple animals coming from the direction of the stones I'd already moved. Not coyotes. Too deep, too loud, and overlapping in a way that sounded almost coordinated. I shut down the excavator and listened. The howling continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped all at once. Silence again. I decided to call it a day. Loaded up my equipment, drove back toward the gate. Halfway down the ranch road, something crossed in front of my truck. Fast, too fast to get a clear look, but big, bigger than a deer. It came from the direction of the property and disappeared into the brush on the west side of the road. I slowed down, scanned the tree line, saw movement, multiple shapes, keeping pace with my truck, staying just inside the cover of the mesquite and juniper. They followed me all the way to the gate. When I got out to close it behind me, I saw them clearly for just a second. Wolves, or something like wolves, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen, with proportions that were slightly wrong. Too tall, too lean, eyes that reflected my headlights in a color that wasn't quite right. Not the green gold of normal animal eye shine, but orange, almost red. There aren't supposed to be wolves in West Texas. Haven't been for over 100 years. I locked the gate and drove straight to my motel, called Sandra Pruitt. I need to talk to you about this project, I said. Is there a problem? There's something on that property. Multiple large animals. They followed me to the gate. I think moving those stones might have... Mr. Sullivan, I hired you to survey a property, not to wildlife spot. Are you able to complete the job or not? I'm saying I think those stones were placed where they were for a reason, and moving them might have consequences. Are you able to complete the contracted work, or do I need to find another surveyor? I thought about my reputation, about the invoice I was planning to submit, about walking away from a job because of what might just be wild dogs in my own imagination. I'll finish it, I said. The next morning, I went back, brought my truck, the excavator, and a shotgun I kept in my vehicle for rattlesnakes. The 8 stones I had moved were surrounded by tracks, hundreds of them, paw prints 3 times the size of a coyote's, pressed deep into the dirt. They circled the stones, converged on them, radiated outward, and leading away from the relocated stones, heading west across the property toward the remaining 4 unmoved markers. A single line of tracks, human-shaped, but wrong. Too long, too narrow, ending in what looked like claws instead of toes. I should have left, should have gotten in my truck and driven away and never come back. But I had 4 stones left to move, 4 more, and the job would be done. The boundary would be corrected. I could submit my final report, get paid, and forget about this place. I moved the 9th stone, the 10th, the 11th. The 12th stone was the largest. It took me almost an hour to dig around it. When I finally got the excavator bucket underneath and lifted it, there was something different below this one. Not just bones and symbols. A pit, maybe 6 feet deep, lined with flat stones, and at the bottom, a skeleton, human, positioned sitting upright, hands bound behind its back with what looked like braided rawhide that had somehow survived. Its skull was facing west, toward the open prairie beyond the property line, and carved into every visible bone, the same symbols I'd seen under all the other stones. I stared into that pit for a long time, trying to rationalize what I was looking at, trying to tell myself it was an old burial, a historical artifact, nothing to do with the job I was contracted to perform. But I knew better. Those stones weren't marking property. They were marking a boundary, a line that something wasn't supposed to cross. And the person in that pit, they'd been placed there deliberately, part of the barrier, part of the price. I should have filled the hole back in, should have left the stone where it was, but I'd already moved 11. Contract said 12. The county was expecting a completed survey. I relocated the final stone to the legal property line, reset it, filled in the pit. By the time I finished, it was almost sunset. I packed up the excavator, loaded my equipment, and started driving toward the gate. They were waiting. Not hiding in the brush this time, standing in the road. 12 of them. No, 13. Shapes that were almost wolves, but not quite. Too tall when they stood on their hind legs. Too intelligent in the way they watched me approach. I stopped the truck 50 yards away. They didn't move. The largest one, the one in front, stood fully upright, 7 feet tall, maybe more. It looked at me with those orange-red eyes, and I felt recognition pass between us. It knew me, knew I was the one who'd moved the stones. It opened its mouth and spoke. Not in any language I recognized, but I understood it anyway, the words appearing in my mind without translation. You opened the way. I was just doing my job, I said, out loud, to a thing that shouldn't exist. The boundary is broken. We are free. I'll put them back. I'll move the stones back to where they were. It tilted its head. The gesture was almost human, almost curious. Too late. The line is crossed. The bones are scattered. The compact is void. The other 12 moved closer, formed a circle around my truck. Not threatening, yet. Just surrounding. What do you want? I asked. West, it said. We go west. We hunt. We feed. We reclaim what was taken. I didn't know, I said. I didn't know what the stones were for. Ignorance is not protection. It dropped back to all fours, turned to face west. But you will know now. You will carry the knowing. You will remember what you released. They left, all 13 of them, moving together like a pack heading west across the open prairie. I watched them until they disappeared over a rise, silhouettes against the setting sun. I sat in my truck for maybe 20 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Then I drove to the county office, found Sandra Pruitt working late. We have a problem, I said. I told her everything. The bones, the symbols, the pit with the human remains, the things that had been contained by the boundary and were now free. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Do you have photos of the human remains?" "Yes." "Send them to me. I'll contact the state archaeologist, report it as a historical burial site. We'll halt the construction project pending investigation." "What about the things I saw? Mr. Sullivan, you've completed your contracted work. Submit your final report and invoice. The county will handle any archaeological findings." "You're not listening." I released something. Those stones were containing... "I'm not paying you to speculate about local folklore," she said. "I'm paying you for survey data." "Do you have survey data?" "Yes, but..." "Then submit it. Your contract is fulfilled." I left her office, drove back to Austin, submitted my final report, got paid. That was 4 months ago. Since then, there have been reports, livestock killings in Caprock County, then in Swisher County, then Floyd County, moving west, spreading out. Ranchers losing cattle and sheep to something that hunts in packs, something too big to be coyotes and too coordinated to be random predators. 3 hikers have gone missing in Palo Duro Canyon. 2 hunters disappeared in the Caprock Canyon State Park. All of them in October and November. All of them in areas west of where I moved those stones. The authorities are calling it a wolf pack, except there haven't been wild wolves in West Texas since the 1920s. They're calling it a big cat, except mountain lions don't hunt in coordinated groups of 13. I know what it is. I know what I released. And I know I can't put it back. The boundary is broken. The stones are in the wrong places. The bones are scattered. The compact, whatever agreement was made generations ago to keep those things contained, is void. And it's my fault. I still do survey work, still measure property lines and resolve boundary disputes. But now I pay attention to the old markers, the stones that don't match the records. The boundaries that were set before there were deeds, or counties, or legal descriptions. Some of those markers aren't about property, they're about containment. They're about keeping things separated that shouldn't be allowed to mix. And when you break those boundaries because you're following legal documents instead of understanding the deeper purpose, you release things that were locked away for good reason. I don't know if those things can be contained again. I don't know if there's a way to restore a boundary once it's broken. All I know is that I opened a door I didn't know existed, and I can't close it. If you work in land surveying, in archaeology, construction, if you encounter old stone markers that don't match your records, especially markers with symbols or bones beneath them, think twice before you move them. Ask the locals why they're there. Dig into the history beyond the deed records. Some boundaries exist for reasons that aren't written down. Some lines were drawn to protect us from things we've forgotten about. And breaking those boundaries has consequences that no legal document can fix. I released something in West Texas, something that was contained for over a century, and now it's spreading, hunting, reclaiming territory it lost long ago. I can't fix it, but maybe someone else can learn from my mistake. If you've worked on land surveys and encountered old markers with warnings attached, or if you've seen the aftermath of boundaries that shouldn't have been moved, I want to hear about it. Comment below and subscribe. Sometimes the only way to prevent these mistakes is to document them, to create a record that exists outside official channels. Stay aware out there and respect the old boundaries even when the law says they're wrong.